Nearly 2 years ago now, I said that you and I were going on a journey, an ambitious adventure to review every single episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender from first to last. Do you remember how that journey went? Well, I'm sure that most of you probably don't, as it didn't really go anywhere. I got 2 episodes in, and, well, there weren't very many people watching them. I mean, compared to how well all of my other videos were doing at the time, it was clear that nobody really wanted to watch videos about Avatar: The Last Airbender. Even all this time later, these 2 videos still aren't doing so hot compared to most of my other videos. The thing is though, you guys, 2 years ago I really wasn't in a very good spot, to be honest. I was working full-time as a 911 dispatcher, destroying my mental health, and trying my best to do at least like 1 video a month on YouTube if I was lucky. I really wanted out of the career that was hurting me emotionally, and uploading a brand new video to see that only like 1% of my audience had watched it was absolutely crushing my hope. I was already having mental health struggles due to my full-time job, and I didn't need my videos doing the same. Today, however, I'm in a different spot. I'm not a 911 dispatcher anymore, and, well, I can spare some extra mental health for you guys to stomp all over. Okay, please don't. That's a joke. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. Hold on just a second. Hey, Sean, if we're gonna use our own background footage, I'm gonna need you to hold the camera a little more steady there, bud.
I'm sorry. I'm standing on a hill, dude. It's cold. Stop. I'm trying, okay?
Okay, we'll try harder, please. Seriously though, I'm at a point in my YouTube journey where I realize that if I'm making a video thinking about how many views it's going to get, I'm doing it for all the wrong reasons. I mean, sure, it'd be cool if a good portion of my audience wanted to watch these, but the important thing is that when I sit down and watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, with the intent of spilling my guts about it, I get a good feeling. A story like this one is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I've never really gotten the chance to watch it from start to finish. With that being said, to those of you who are here right now, you are the real fans, and I really appreciate you. I mean, the analytics don't lie, dude. These videos typically aren't my most popular, so on that note, if you're here right now, that by default makes you a real one. This series of videos is for me and my friends who are here to just enjoy some quality time strolling down memory lane. And with that being said, thank you so much for being here, and if you're one of my friends who joined in on my YouTube journey over the last 2 years and you have literally no idea what I'm talking about, I'll have the first video linked in the description box below, or maybe in the top right corner here. Since this is a chronological series of videos, definitely start with the first one. Today, on our nostalgic walk down memory lane, we're checking out Book 1, Chapter 3, The Southern Air Temple.
Wait till you see it, Katara. The Air Temple is one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Aang, I know you're excited, but it's been 100 years since you've been home.
That's why I'm so excited.
It's just that a lot can change in all that time.
Aang glides off of Appa with a hop, saying that he just needs to see it for himself. Aang approaches a sleeping Sokka, trying to wake him up, but he rolls over, refusing. We see Aang with a cheeky grin on his face grab a stick and use it to trick Sokka into thinking there's a snake in his sleeping bag, which works like a charm to get him up and at him. As that's happening, we cut back over to Prince Zuko and his uncle arriving at a large dock lined with Fire Nation ships. Their plan is to have their ship, which is extremely damaged from their battle with the Avatar, repaired as quickly as possible so they can get back on their way without losing his trail. Zuko demands that both him and his uncle not speak word of the Avatar, as he fears that if any firebenders catch word of his existence, it'll be a race to see who can find him the quickest.
I don't want anyone getting in the way.
Getting in the way of what, Prince Zuko?
Captain Zhao.
Its commander now. And General Iroh, great hero of our nation.
Retired General.
The Fire Lord's brother and son are welcome guests anytime. What brings you to my harbor?
Our ship is being repaired.
That's quite a bit of damage.
Zuko and Iroh do their best to weave a tale explaining how their ship could have possibly taken on that much damage, but it comes across not very believable, and of course, this guy is already seemingly suspicious of them from the get-go. Their sloppily constructed story insists that they damaged their ship that bad by crashing into an Earth Kingdom ship.
Really? You must regale me with all the thrilling details. Join me for a drink?
Sorry, but we have to go.
Prince Zuko, show Commander Zhao your respect. We would be honored to join you. Do you have any ginseng tea? It's my favorite.
While that's going on, we cut back over to Aang, Katara, and Sokka, who are riding on Appa, heading to the temple that Aang called home 100 years ago. Sokka is caught up pretty hard on the fact that he's absolutely starving, and unfortunately, Aang used his whale jerky to start the campfire last night, not realizing that it was food. Meanwhile, Katara is caught up on something really serious that she needs to tell Aang.
Before we get to the temple, I want to talk to you about the Airbenders.
What about them?
Well, I just want you to be prepared for what you might see. The Fire Nation is ruthless. They killed my mother. They could have done the same to your people.
Just because no one has seen an airbender doesn't mean the Fire Nation killed them all. They probably escaped.
Katara struggles to get through to him, acknowledging that it's hard to accept, but regardless, Aang insists that she just doesn't get it. His logic is that air temples can only be reached by flying bison, which of course the Fire Nation doesn't have. On that note, he's confident that the air temple will be a booming metropolis of monks and their flying bison. Appa flies through the mountain ranges up in the clouds, eventually going upwards at nearly a 90-degree angle until reaching its peak.
There it is. The Southern Air Temple.
Aang, it's amazing!
We're home, buddy. We're home.
Back at the docks, we see the commander in his heavily guarded tent in front of a map, explaining to Zuko and Uncle Iroh their plan to have the Earth Kingdom capital under their rule by the end of the year. In taking that capital, the Fire Lord will finally be victorious in winning the war in the name of the Fire Nation.
If my father thinks the rest of the world will follow him willingly, then he is a fool.
2 years at sea have done little to temper your tongue. So, how is your search for the Avatar going?
My fault entirely.
We haven't found him yet.
Did you really expect to? The Avatar died 100 years ago, along with the rest of the Airbenders.
Based on the look on Zuko's face, the commander starts to believe that he might have seen some evidence of the Avatar's existence. However, Zuko denies it, saying that he hasn't found anything. Unfortunately, Commander Zhao can smell Zuko's lies from a mile away. He stresses the importance of sharing any information that he's hiding for the best interest of the Fire Nation. However, Zuko holds firm, saying that, just like the commander said, the Avatar probably passed a long time ago.
Come on, Uncle. We're going.
Commander Zhao, we interrogated the crew as you instructed. They confirmed Prince Zuko had the Avatar in custody, but let him escape.
Now, remind me, how exactly was your ship damaged?
Atop one of the highest elevation points in the southern hemisphere, we see a beautiful temple among the clouds, sprawling with walking paths, caves, and gorgeous towers. At its base, we see Appa standing idly, waiting for Aang and his friends who are ascending the mountain via the main path. Katara is blown away, feeling honored to be one of the only outsiders ever to step foot in this temple. Meanwhile, Sokka is too blinded by his hunger to care where he's at. Aang, on the other hand, is through the roof excited to be back where he has his footing and hopeful to find some friendly faces around here somewhere.
So that's where my friends and I would play airball. And over there is where the bison would sleep. And
What's wrong?
this place used to be full of monks and lemurs and bison. Now there's just a bunch of weeds. I can't believe how much things have changed.
Aang stands there in shock, but also really saddened, starting to believe that Katara may have been right. At that moment, Sokka steps in, hoping to lighten the mood as he asks Aang to teach him how to play airball. Next thing you know, we see the two of them atop an assortment of wooden poles, each of varying heights. Aang gets the ball first, and with a very nonchalant serve, Sokka gets struck by the ball and ends up flying through the goalpost.
Making him feel better is putting me in a world of hurt.
Katara, check this out.
Fire Nation.
We should tell him.
Katara turns around and calls Aang, who comes running over. Before he can get there though, Katara decides at the last second to cover both the mask and Sokka with snow, using her waterbending to distract Aang from seeing it, clearly worrying about how he's gonna react. Aang chuckles at Katara's trick and runs off, excited to see the rest of the air temple. Meanwhile, in a bit of ominous foreshadowing, Sokka warns his sister that she can't protect Aang from the truth forever.
Katara, firebenders were here. You can't pretend they weren't.
I can for Aang's sake. If he finds out that the Fire Nation invaded his home, he'll be devastated.
Hey, guys! I want you to meet somebody.
Who's that?
Monkey Atso, the greatest airbender in the world. He taught me everything I know.
But the true secret is in the gooey center.
In this flashback, we see Aang feeling bummed out and sharing his feelings with his mentor. He wonders if maybe the monks made a mistake and he isn't really the Avatar. Gyatso says the only mistake that the monks made was telling Aang that he was the Avatar before he was 16 years old, as per tradition.
But we can't concern ourselves with what was. We must act on what is.
But Gyatso, how do I know if I'm ready for this?
Your questions will be answered when you're old enough to enter the Air Temple Sanctuary. Inside, you will meet someone who will guide you on your journey.
Who is it?
When you are ready, he will reveal himself to you.
The memory ends with Aang and Gyatso pulling a prank on some of the monks nearby, and we cut back to the modern day where Aang's face is plastered with a very apathetic and empty look. He walks towards the temple, telling his friends that there's someone he's ready to meet. His friends follow him in confusion until they reach the front door. Katara points out that it's completely impossible that someone could have survived in there for 100 years. However, Aang argues with her, saying that he survived in the iceberg for that long somehow, so on that note, nothing is impossible. Ever the optimist, Aang has high hopes that whoever is in there will be able to help him figure out this whole Avatar thing. On that note, we see Aang unlock the door with the one and only key, airbending.
Hello? Anyone home?
Back on the docks of Commander Zhao, we see Zuko and his uncle still inside of the tent, getting belittled by the commander for being bested by a 12-year-old boy. Zuko tells him that this boy isn't to be underestimated. He made that mistake once, and he says it isn't going to happen again. However, he's infuriated when Commander Zhao tells him that there isn't a chance of it happening again because he's going to be the one taking over the responsibility of hunting down the Avatar. He tells his men to keep the two of them here as he walks out of the tent. Meanwhile, back in the temple, we see Aang and his friends walking through a corridor filled with hundreds of statues, all confused as to the significance of them.
Who are all these people?
I'm not sure. But it feels like I know them somehow. Look, that one's an airbender.
And this one's a waterbender. They're lined up in a pattern. Air, water, earth, and fire.
That's the Avatar cycle.
Of course. They're avatars. All these people are your past lives, Aang.
Wow.
Aang looks around the room completely in awe about how many statues there are, quietly reveling in the fact that these are all past lives that his soul has experienced through reincarnation. Aang ends up coming upon one specific statue that has him completely enamored. He stands directly in front of it, locking eyes with the tall, ominous-looking stone effigy, and its eyes twinkle as Aang is almost in a different world. Katara has to shake him to snap him out of it.
Who is that?
That's Avatar Roku, the avatar before me.
You were a firebender? No wonder I didn't trust you when we first met.
There's no writing. How do you know his name?
I'm not sure. I just know it somehow.
You just couldn't get any weirder.
Just then, the entire group is taken back by the sound of something approaching. We see a shadow incoming, and everyone fears that it's a firebender. As Sokka leads the charge, jumping out from cover, prepared to attack, he's surprised to find a little white and gray lemur with the cutest little green eyes. Aang is excited, wanting to befriend the lemur, however, Sokka sees it as nothing but dinner. The two of them rush for the lemur, scaring it into running away. As they sprint through the hallway, Aang uses his airbending to trip Sokka and leave him in the dust. Not long after, he comes upon a dead end in the form of a ledge high above ground level, and without any thought, he leaps right off of it, letting the air be his guide towards his new lemur friend. As that's going on, we cut back over to Commander Zhao, who is returning to his tent, advising that his search party is ready. He tells Zuko that he's going to be getting out to sea, and after that, his guards will escort Zuko back to his ship, and then they'll be free to go.
Why? Are you worried I'm going to try and stop you?
You stop me. Impossible.
Don't underestimate me, Zhao. I will capture the Avatar before you.
Prince Zuko, that's enough.
You can't compete with me. I have hundreds of warships under my command, and you're just a banished prince. No home, no allies. Your own father doesn't even want you.
Zuko argues further with Commander Zhao, telling him that when he returns with the Avatar, his father will accept him with open arms and restore his place on the throne. However, Commander Zhao hits him with a shocking truth. If his father really wanted him back in the first place, he would have accepted him, Avatar or not. Nevertheless, his father sees him as a disgrace to not only the family, but the entire Fire Nation. As the two of them continue prodding back and forth, Zuko challenges Commander Zhao to a duel, which, of course, the commander accepts.
It's a shame your father won't be here to watch me humiliate you. I guess your uncle will do.
Prince Zuko, have you forgotten what happened last time you dueled the master?
I will never forget.
Back at the Air Temple, Aang is still in hot pursuit of the lemur, who's now made his escape into an old and decayed tent. Aang follows him, making his way past the curtains draped over the structure, and he's hit with an extreme moment of shock to find a pile of bodies. Fire Nation soldiers, all surrounding one specific target. The remains of none other than Gyatso. Just then, Sokka walks in and finds Aang with his head in his hands, weeping in front of what seemed to be the final stand at this temple where his people used to exist happily and freely. When Sokka realizes what Aang stumbled upon, he rests a hand on his shoulder in an attempt to comfort him. However, he's shocked to see Aang begin to glow that mysterious bright blue glow, looking with hollow blue eyes. Back in the temple itself, Katara stands before all of the statues, still in awe of their significance. However, she's shocked and scared for Aang when all of the statues' eyes mysteriously begin to glow the same blue that she saw from him previously. She runs off to find him, and we cut straight across the globe to the Earth Kingdom, the Water Tribe, and the Fire Nation. All of which have similar shrines to what we saw in the Air Temple, whose depictions of the Avatar now feature eyes which are glowing bright, signifying to everyone across the globe the return of the Avatar.
Aang, come on! Snap out of it! Ah! out firebenders killed Gyatso.
Oh no! It's his avatar spirit! He must have triggered it! I'm gonna try and calm him down!
Katara approaches Aang step by step as we cut back over to the docks where the sky is drenched in blood-red clouds. Both Zuko and Commander Zhao stand in the middle of the courtyard, prepared to duel. The two go at it, each fiercely using their firebending in an attempt to best the other. Commander Zhao seems to be too strong to conquer as he gets Zuko on the ground within a few moments, but Zuko proves himself to be a worthy adversary, using his dexterity and cunning to kick the commander's legs out from under him. With Commander Zhao's root disturbed, he's easily knocked back and toppled as Zuko holds a fist ready to fire blast into his face.
Do it! That's it? Your father raised a coward.
Next time you get in my way, I promise. I won't hold back.
No, Prince Zuko. Do not taint your victory.
Uncle Iroh talks down to Commander Zhao, scolding him for his behavior in defeat despite his reputation as a great and powerful leader. Then Iroh says something that not only can you tell hits Zuko really hard, but it's also something that I think as a man, he really needed to hear.
Even in exile, my nephew is more honorable than you. Thanks again for the tea. It was delicious.
Did you really mean that, Uncle?
Of course. I told you ginseng tea is my favorite.
Back at the temple, Aang is in the air, fully engulfed by the power of his avatar spirit. The world around him is going crazy as Katara is doing everything she can to calm him. She takes a moment to acknowledge his pain and recognize that where he's coming from is completely valid. She relates to his pain as it's similar to what she and Sokka felt when they lost their mother. She tells him that it doesn't undo the hurt, but he still has a family in her and Sokka.
Katara and I aren't gonna let anything happen to you. Promise.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It wasn't your fault.
But you were right. And if firebenders found this temple, that means they found the other ones too. I really am the last airbender.
Not long after that, we cut back to the temple where Aang is standing face to face with the statue of Avatar Roku, the last life that he lived before this one. He questions how Roku is supposed to help him if he can't talk with him. Katara suggests that maybe he'll find a way, and just then, almost like fate, we see that lemur from before standing in the doorway. He approaches Sokka and drops a few armfuls of fruit for him to eat in hopes of not being chased for dinner. He then climbs atop Aang's head, seeking companionship and safety.
You, me, and Appa. We're all that's left of this place. We have to stick together. Katara, Sokka, say hello to the newest member of our family.
What are you gonna name him?
Momo.
We see Aang and Momo side by side on the back of Appa flying into the clouds. They watch solemnly as the temple that they used to call home slowly fades into a desolate and quiet life among the clouds, which is where this episode comes to an end. Man, I don't even know where to begin with this one, you guys. There's just so much to say. This show really does tackle some heavy topics, and I'm impressed by the way that it goes about it. Usually, I prefer to take my analysis from the top, starting with things that I perceived early on in the episode, but there's an elephant in the room that I really feel like we need to touch on right out the gate. This episode was our first look at the genocide of the Air Nomads by the Fire Nation. And honestly, it's so painful. it hurts. I know that this is just a children's cartoon, but if you don't see the similarities to real life and how important this is to digest with that in mind, then I'm sorry, but you clearly have your head buried in the sand. I'm gonna be brutally honest and vulnerable with you guys here for a second. This episode is a hard watch for me. As someone who's invested a lot of my free time in learning about history and opened my eyes to the pain of those who've continued to walk among us after surviving these genocide attempts. This is so insanely important to see, and as crazy as it sounds on face value, it's even more important that this was shown to kids on Nickelodeon. History is destined to repeat itself if we don't break the cycle. As people and the future generations of this world, it's our job to do something about the ongoing hate and violence. Step one, in my opinion, after letting go of our own hate, is raising our kids to be mindful and accepting of others. Raising them to know that inciting violence against someone just because they're different from you isn't what makes for a society that has potential to flourish for generations to come. It needs to be said that messages like this really can be hard to digest. It can be difficult to get across in a way that isn't shocking for kids, and on that note, again, I really appreciate how mindful they were about the approach here. It was gripping, but not enough to turn away young viewers, but the point here is that the genocide of the Air Nomads is 100% based on a true story, and not just one true story. The Armenian genocide, the Tutsi in Rwanda, the Nanking massacre, the Holocaust, and I mean, we're just scratching the surface of historically documented events. Stuff like this needs to be seen in this format. Sometimes kids and teenagers have a hard time digesting and really grasping the severity of these kinds of events when it's just being seen through the words of a textbook or heard through the words of a teacher. But when it's coming from a show that you find yourself relating to on a human level, it definitely has potential to land a lot harder and portray a more accurate message. For example, it ties a bit into a community post that I made the other day. I asked you guys in a poll which of the 4 elemental kingdoms you most identify with or would be a part of. For me, I realized that I'm definitely an air nomad type. I don't want to fight anyone, I just want to live my happy life and be free to do as I please. The thought of this entire group of people whom I find myself identifying a lot with being completely wiped out by the Fire Nation really just hits hard. It makes me ponder about the current climate of the world around us in general, and man, this world is in a tragic state. On top of all that though, Aang being the lone sole survivor of this genocide, him having to experience the striking realization that all of his people are gone, not to mention the weight of the world being on his shoulders. He knows that with him being the Avatar, he's the only one who has a true hope of stopping the Fire Nation from forcing the entire world under their rule. Furthermore, he's the only person left who could continue the Airbender's legacy. And he has the world's biggest target on his back, which keeps manifesting in the form of giant explosions and massive Avatar state light beams. The tale that we're being told here, you guys, is a really beautifully woven one, and it's crazy because that's just one angle. All we've seen here is really just the Air Nomad side of things, and more specifically Aang's side of things. We still have 3 completely different nations to explore, not to mention Sokka and Katara's role in all of this. Speaking of Katara, I will never forget that part in the beginning of this one where we learn that the Fire Nation killed her mother. The defeat and sadness in her voice. As if it weren't bad enough that they've attacked Katara's people, it's even more personal for her given that they took one of the most important people in her world. The biggest thing that stuck with me though is that in this exact moment, this teenage girl isn't stuck on her feelings or the pain that she felt when the Fire Nation killed her mother. Her focus is on her worry for Aang and how shocking it's going to be for him to realize that he really is the final Airbender walking the face of this planet. She sees Aang's optimism and confidence that his people escaped, not realizing just how hopeless it really is until he has to see it for himself. Right now, Katara is in a position where she's at least had some time to process and has felt that loss already though. And she knows that he's in for a world of upset, from experience. I mean, Katara was doing her best to protect Aang from learning the truth about his people, but that effort didn't have much of a point other than postponing the inevitable. It's a tough one where she's feeling a solid mix of not wanting to hurt his feelings, however, knowing deep inside that he deserves to know what happened. He deserves to know what kind of world he's found himself waking up in. He deserves to know that he's kind of had destiny dropped in his lap. It's just a matter of revealing the truth to him in a way that isn't going to rock the boat too much. Sadly though, that's just not possible. There isn't any way that you can tell someone that their entire world was destroyed and not have that news completely destroy their world. On a more light-hearted note, I definitely want to acknowledge how amazing it is that they put some emphasis on Katara and Sokka getting to be some of the first outsiders without negative intentions to experience an air temple. Like, that's just such an insane moment when you think about it. This is an incredibly sacred place, and I really appreciate how much Katara recognizes that. This early on in the series, we're starting to be shown that Katara is a very empathetic, caring, and wise person. We're shown that she can take interest in the importance of others' feelings, and on a wider note, the importance of culturally defining structures, especially those of a people wiped out by genocide. She has nothing but respect for this place, and her demeanor here was an admirable trait for sure. Now, I definitely need to bring up Gyatso telling Aang in the past that he was going to meet someone in the air temple when he's old enough to go inside, who's gonna guide him on his journey. This right here is such an interesting prophecy to me because it's so direct yet incredibly open-ended. We know exactly where this is going to happen, and that's about it. Who he's meeting, though, could literally be anybody. If there's multiple people there, he might not know which one is the right one because he wasn't told what to look out for. We do know, though, that a century later, Aang meets the one lone living creature left behind in the air temple, Momo. This right here, without a doubt, has to be foreshadowing that Momo plays a bigger role in all of this than it seems on face value, right? Furthermore, I'm pretty sure that Momo knows his role too. His interactions with the group in the temple really seemed like he was acting with intention, not like a normal animal just operating on animal nature. It's like he could understand Aang and Sokka's intentions. It almost felt like he guided Aang to Gyatso's final resting place on purpose as well. The thing is though, it's very plausible that the person he was supposed to meet in the temple was his past self, who would guide him through his experience in the Avatar state. We all saw the eyes on that statue glow a bit, and it really feels like they were trying to make a big point in emphasizing how Aang got lost in Avatar Roku's statue. Almost as if he was communicating with him, or at least like gathering and downloading all of his past memories subconsciously. I mean, Aang being destined to meet the previous iterations of the Avatar spirit is probably more likely, but I love the idea of Momo being the person he was supposed to meet because he's the cutest and it would really feel like a nice curveball. It really just feels like they're subtly hinting towards Momo being a part of a bigger picture here, and if they aren't, man, that was a really missed opportunity if you ask me. Now, turning this ship in a different direction, we have to focus for a bit on the other story being told here. That of the exiled prince and his wise uncle. I definitely need to point out how Commander Zhao was just immediately suspicious of Zuko and Iroh arriving at his docks. You could tell plain as day he could smell something fishy the moment that they pulled up with that destroyed ship. I found it very interesting though, how the three of them caught up and learned about Zhao's new rank since they last spoke. It makes me curious about the history between these two specifically. Zuko seems to be very leery of him, and Uncle Iroh clearly has a negative opinion of him, but I can't help but wonder if that stems possibly from something that happened before the events of this show that we aren't yet aware of. If not, then, I guess this interaction and duel between the two definitely defined their history from this point on, that's for sure. I did find it interesting that in this episode, we learn that the Fire Nation seems to widely believe that the Avatar died 100 years ago. Meanwhile, Zuko has always remained of the belief that the Avatar is still alive. Even in exile, he searches where the rest of the Fire Nation assumed victory long ago. It makes me wonder deeply about Zuko and if he knows more than he's leading on. Sure, he could be desperately searching aimlessly for the Avatar in hopes of eventually proving himself to his father and getting his spot on the throne back, but on that same note, I can't help but be curious about Zuko and his drive to keep searching when everyone else has given up and assumed the Avatar to be deceased and not reincarnated again. So I know in the first few videos in this series, we touched on Zuko a bit and how I recall a lot of what I've seen of this show being a coming-of-age story for him. These early episodes make me so happy because we really see a lot about his character and the darkness that lives inside of him, but also the juxtaposition between him and his uncle, as well as the valuable guidance that his uncle provides. A phenomenal example of this is when Zuko and Commander Zhao are face to face in the tent. Zuko angrily tells him that he's going to beat him to the Avatar, as Uncle Iroh is telling him that that's enough. Sure, this is definitely him not wanting Zuko to stir the pot and cause a fight, but furthermore this is also Iroh advising against Zuko being so cocky, especially referencing the last time that he dueled a master. Iroh realizes that by Zuko being a cocky jerk who's looking for a fight, that makes him no better than Commander Zhao. Speaking of Zuko dueling a master though, this episode was the first time that we touched on Zuko's scar and the significance of it. I know it was forever ago, but in the last few videos, honor was brought up at least a few times, specifically as it pertains to Zuko, his father exiling him, and his journey to regain his spot as Prince of the Fire Nation. I feel like the scar on Zuko's face is going to tie directly into that, as well as playing a big part of accepting himself and, well, his coming-of-age story in general. I mean, it's definitely worth pointing out that Zuko had the opportunity to leave Commander Zhao with a scar just as bad as his, yet he refused to. I'm sure in the past Zuko may have done it, but it's clear that his uncle is having an effect on him. He's learning compassion. He's learning to be a strong person with a moral compass. He's learning to be everything that the Fire Nation isn't, and at this moment, I have a feeling deep inside that Zuko will never be getting his position on the throne back. I honestly think that if he did earn it back, he might not accept it. In closing though, I definitely want to touch on Commander Zhao being a massive tool and how Zuko is so lucky that Uncle Iroh was there to have his back. This guy lost and is totally salty about it, so what does he do? Cheap shot from behind, of course, like a true coward. I'm just thankful that Uncle Iroh saw that crap coming. Speaking of him though, I feel like Uncle Iroh has bigger plans for himself and his nephew's destiny. I'm not 100% sure, but I imagine that his time serving the Fire Nation is one that maybe he looks back and possibly feels regret for because of things that he could have had to do, or maybe on the other hand he looks back on it feeling content because potentially in his position of power he wasn't like the other leaders were. As a result, maybe in his retirement, he's carving out his own path in this world with his nephew, seemingly overseeing this mission to get Zuko's spot on the throne back. But I think ultimately, Iroh might secretly have bigger plans to hopefully teach Zuko about what it means to be human and to forge a life for yourself that prioritizes things other than domination, power, and seeking validation from others. So originally, when I recorded this video, this is where it ended, and I'd transitioned to my outro, but as I was editing, I found myself daydreaming about life at the Southern Air Temple. As someone who identifies mostly with the Air Nomads, I can't help but imagine just how amazing and peaceful life among them was back in the time of Aang's childhood. Of course, before being frozen and the genocide on behalf of the Fire Nation, I feel like I'd be doing myself a disservice by not acknowledging these feelings and touching a bit on the life that these people had the pleasure of living. The Air Nomads, once upon a time, lived a very peaceful life, with temples atop jagged mountaintops that no person stuck to mere ground transportation would ever have hopes of reaching. They had the ability to build a society that evolved around what they valued most. They had the ability to come and go as they please, seeing all of the different happy faces along the way. They could fly free, never looking for a fight, and just focusing on living their best life. The life of soaring through the clouds without a care in the world. It just sounds so amazing and blissful. When we get this flashback, we're treated to not only a look at the temple back in its prime, basking in the sun's loving embrace, but also its people. One huge thing here that makes a giant statement about their people and their way of life is realizing that when we see this flashback, the Air Nomads are currently having their turn in the elemental cycle of the Avatar's reincarnation. When Avatar Roku, the Firebender, passed away, the Avatar spirit was reborn into Aang, because as per the pattern, the next Avatar was destined to be an Airbender. Gyatso has been put in charge of training and mentoring the young Avatar, which is a massive responsibility. That's kind of a big deal. The huge statement I'm referencing, however, is specifically what it is that they're doing for their training. Baking cakes with a gooey center, airbending them to the correct swirl with perfect peaks, then using their bending abilities to launch them at their fellow monks who are currently meditating. They're simply pulling pranks on their fellow airbenders in the name of a good laugh. And if that right there isn't the most pristine encapsulation of what being an airbender means, I don't know what is. They're the kind of folks who don't take things all too seriously, yet they know exactly when it's time to take things seriously. I mean, they are pacifists after all, so of course they aren't fighting or training him to battle. They're training him to think outside of the box when it comes to his airbending, which, as the Avatar, is absolutely crucial. Honestly, guys, it felt really important to take a moment to reflect on the lifestyle that these people lived, and given that Aang has 3 other elements to learn as the Avatar, we're definitely going to get the opportunity to check out the lifestyles of the other nations as well. Granted, in the present, under the threat of the Fire Nation, and not looking to the past like we have to do for the Airbenders, but still, I really love the idea of taking the time to look deeper into these aspects as these videos continue on. But of course, what do you guys think? Are you excited to see where the story goes? Let me know in the comments down below. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. Of course, massive shout out to my besties in the True 90s Kids tier on Patreon. You guys are the greatest and I absolutely adore you all. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and maybe give a little praise to the algorithm in hopes that it pushes this one to everyone else. If you want to go on another nostalgic walk down memory lane, check out this video on the left about the moment that the Rugrats learned they couldn't trust Angelica, or check out this cool video on the right. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Peace.